Thank you for joining us again here at Pursuit of Purpose for another live episode of What Are We Doing? And our topic or our series that we've been in for the past few weeks is
Fatherhood.
Fatherhood, being a dad. And we would love to hear from you. So if you're out there in the audience or if you're scrolling through Facebook and you come across us, we would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Our specific aspect or angle about fatherhood today is respect. We're going to talk about what does respect mean? How does it apply to being a dad? How does it apply to being a man? And how can we develop self-respect and how can we impart respect on our children?
Yes,
Right? Because
that's part of our commission as dads.
So what does the word respect mean to you, Chuck?
Well, to me, to respect something has to have, this is just my opinion, has to have a healthy reverence and a healthy fear. So when I say fear, in human terms, I'm thinking fear of knowing that everything on earth is going to have a rate of decline if we don't give it proper respect. It's just that things will deteriorate. Our bodies will start to break down, our mind, our vehicles, our tools. But if we take care of them, things could last indefinitely. And so to give something a healthy amount of reverence, if you will, knowing its value, and then knowing if I don't take care of it, I'm going to it's going to lose its value. So now that's speaking generally. Later, hopefully in our conversation, we'll get into how to apply that to us and then how to impart that on them.
Yeah. So you did really good. In fact, you didn't read it, you didn't cheat, but I'm going to cheat. I'm going to read the dictionary definitions, both as a noun and as a verb. The noun definition is a feeling. This one is a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something, elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. That's one definition. The second definition is due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. That's another one. As a verb, it means to admire, which is more or less what you were saying, to admire deeply as a result of their abilities, someone or something, their qualities or achievements. Have due regard for their feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions, to avoid interfering with or harming, to recognize or abide by, to agree with as far as legal stuff. That's also a way to
respect the law.
Yes.
So, I like the word admiration because it has good cousin words, like you said, quality, value.
Yes.
That's what we admire in anything, in institutions or those sorts of things, but definitely people.
So if we were to practice respecting ourselves, developing self-respect, what does that do? What's the gain? What's the lift from that? How do we benefit if we practice self-respect?
Well, I mean, to answer the question, my first conclusion would be I'm now putting myself in the best possible position, the best possible path to a position of some sense of health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, even financial health. And so if you're about becoming a healthier person, I think most of the people who tune into this program and others that we post, they are now interested in investing in their own health. So they have a healthy self-respect. And so I like the health pursuit.
Okay. So another thing that brings purpose behind self-respect is that as we learn and practice self-respect and get better and better at it, we gain freedom.
Yes.
Because as you develop your self-respect, you gain confidence. Naturally, you gain confidence and you gain the ability to become your authentic self.
Yes.
Which is one of the greatest forms of freedom that the human race can experience.
Right.
To be able to live authentically, to be who you are inside on the outside.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that comes through a healthy practice of self-respect. And you can have that freedom regardless of where you are in your life.
Yeah.
As long as you have a healthy practice of self-respect.
Right.
So one of the ways to develop a healthy practice of self-respect is to be honest.
Yes.
To have a true reflection.
Authentic.
looking inside of yourself,
Right.
and becoming a person of integrity, a
Yes.
person who is one whole person.
Yes. That is definitely one way for sure.
Yes.
And probably one of the best ways. I know a lot of times when you and I are in coaching or counseling situations, the reason that the desire for improvement is even appealing and we get solicited to help facilitate that appeal is because folks have been living inauthentically. They have been living in their own confinements, probably fears, maybe even ignorance to some degree. That's not an insulting word. They just don't know. And now they're exposing themselves with courage to what they will have to do next or begin to do next in order to know that inner freedom. A lot of times when folks come in, let's just say it's a couple and or maybe even a parent child, since we're kind of on fatherhood as our topic, and I see these parents, maybe these dads, and they are just gripped with fear, like they can't move forward. They're afraid to say anything, and I'm sitting here looking at them with a measure of compassion, but ready to be a confronter also to say, what are you afraid of? And I think they're afraid of the classics. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid their child will hate them and all these things. So away from their child, we start talking about, well, what if you are afraid of becoming what your child won't like? Well, what would you want your child to be attracted to? And obviously they're going to say quality things like, well, maturity and self-respect and those things. That they become those things.
Yes. And since you brought up fear, one of the biggest fears that we don't talk about as a man because we're supposed to be, manly or whatever. We're supposed to be macho. But one of the biggest fears that we have, and we don't admit it a lot of times, is the fear of being judged by others.
Yes.
The fear of other people being superior to us.
Right.
And
that fear of inferiority.
Yes.
That's where the word comes from.
And this is a sad thing that I truly believe that part of the problem in the decline of the household and the decline of fatherhood in the home has a lot to do with this, a lot to do with this fear aspect, and how in the media and in certain circles, manhood is diminished,
right,
and judged harshly. If you behave as a masculine human,
right,
then you're toxic.
Yes.
That's a judgmental thing. And that's a very fear-based term.
Yes.
This has been weaponized throughout our culture to diminish the value of masculinity and fatherhood.
Yes.
And it's tearing apart the American home and the American family,
which I think
as
is
the core,
as the intent. That's what they want.
Yes.
Yes.
And when you say they, I hate that term. Not to pick on you, but to be more specific, there are factions in this country that are seeking control politically, and they use these tactics, fear-based tactics, to perform mental assaults on particular people, and men are specifically under attack in that regard, because men represent a lot of things. Not to say that women can't be leaders or inferior in any way, but men are innately endowed with characteristics that put them in the front, that they are meant to be bigger, stronger, more physically able, to prepare them to be protectors, to prepare them to be physical leaders.
Yes.
On the battlefield. And the battlefield may not be a war battlefield. The battlefield may be protecting their home, protecting their family, showing their children what a real man is supposed to live like.
Yes.
And a real man is not intended to live as a sniveling, whining, inauthentic, dishonest person who lacks self-respect. Right. No, we are intended to live with self-respect as empowered people to show both our children and our culture that being masculine is a beautiful thing.
Yes. I've heard several analogies through the years that I think reiterate that. And the first one, and I know you're a boating, you're a watercraft guy.
Oh yeah.
So you're going to get this perfectly. So arguably the toughest part of a ship or a boat is the bow, because that's the one that's punching the waves as we go. The engine, okay, has the motivator, if you will, has its part too. So a lot of the analogies put men as the bow. We're the wave breakers. We're the ones we're the first thing to confront anything that's going to resist. The engine is everybody behind us, starting with maybe a spouse, our wives, and then our children. But that energy to say, we want you to be out there ahead. We push you forward. And then the other analogy that I heard recently was the image of this huge sprawling, like a tree, like a big oak tree. And we're in the South. We have a lot of big oak trees around here that are, they could be 100 years old. And what gives it its foundation, if you will, its fearlessness, that's the root systems deep inside the trunk and the big thick branches. But when you get to the flowery parts, the parts that bloom and blossom, that's probably your more female parts. But it can't exist without that base. Right. And so and that base has to be tough and strong. And I found something interesting, and it had to do with our storm seasons. And this goes down to Florida, and they started measuring. These people just measure, all type of horticulture things, and they started looking at some of the fruit that is native to Florida. We'll say oranges. There's a popular one. And after these series of storms, they noticed that the size of the fruit, the pulp begins to grow a little bit. They're like, oh, that's interesting. Not a lot, maybe centimeters, but it's noticeable. And definitely to the scientific eye. And so of course, scientists are curious, and they're like, well, how did that happen? And the way they analyze it is the resistance of those fruit trees against 200-mile-an-hour wind and all the other pressures actually expanded the root systems, expanded the trunk systems, which in turn put out better fruit. I thought that was an excellent analogy for going through the difficult things in life fearlessly.
Yeah, and that just stands to prove the point that it's kind of a little separate topic, but it's very much closely related, that through trials, strength is gained.
Yes.
Through trials, the fruit is increased. The fruit of life is increased, much like the trials of the citrus tree increase the fruit. The trials of life also increase the fruit.
Right, which is the empowering agent. Yes. The empowering agent, and I know that's part of our next analogy, is freedom leads to power.
Yes.
And the empowering agent of any tree is going to be that root system to trunk system. And because without it, there will be no fruit.
Yes. And something that I've heard talked about a lot lately, one of the things is that, people sit around talking, different aged people, different experienced people. And I've heard this said, kids these days, they just don't have respect. Mm-hmm. Kids in school, they don't respect. They don't respect each other. They don't respect property. They don't have any respect for themselves. Well, how do we expect them to learn respect?
Well,
how does a kid learn anything?
Right.
They don't learn it from being told.
No.
They learn it from what they see.
That's right.
So when we want kids, and it doesn't matter what gender of child, if we want a child to learn to be respectable, respectful, and self-respecting, they have to see it modeled in front of them.
And then they mimic that model.
That's right.
That's right.
So we must focus on ourselves. We are responsible. We have a duty.
Yes.
To build up our self-respect so that we can perform respectfully.
Yes.
As men, as dads, as leaders in our community and in our culture.
It's quite often people come in, let's say a couple comes in, and I'll typically, pick on the men first. It's just, it's kind of a men lead. All right, sir, you're first. So by this point, I've heard enough exchanges that we're starting to see the weaknesses in their defense mechanisms, not the good ones, not the assertiveness, not the empowering, the ones that are probably less attractive, sarcasm, belittling, defensiveness. And so I will ask them, I'll say, so earlier, a little while ago, and you and I have pretty good memories. So just a few minutes ago, I think you said this when she said that. Is that right? And they're like, yes. And I said, where did you learn that? And they're like, what do you mean? I go, well, I can't imagine you perfectly made it up. Where did you learn that version? And boy, they start thinking. And next thing you know, there's dad. And I said, oh, okay. I said, did you like it when your dad talked to you that way?
Right.
And they're like, no. I said, so how do you qualify that you're just repeating history? Oh, and I love those confrontations because these poor guys, it's almost like they don't know any better, but they do know better because the moment I confront it, and I know you confront it, I've heard you do it in a healthy way. Well, we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're trying to help folks, but we have that gentle confrontation and they are quick to want to change it. That's a good thing. But without that gentle confrontation, they're going to just keep repeating the problem.
Yeah.
And likely passing it on.
That's right. That's right. So what's a good, we talked about the pros and cons of having or not having self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about some good practices to help develop a healthy self-respect. So one of the things that I have worked with in my life, because this was a problem for me. I'm not exempt. I went through an enormous reinvention process for myself, with myself, and through myself.
Yeah, likewise. Yes.
Through that process, one of the things that I began to do was learning from others.
Yes.
I sought out materials to learn from that I could feed into myself to inspire me to be better. I constantly looked for ways to have better input.
Yes.
So that I could adjust my output.
Perfect.
And that was believe it or not, Chuck, that was a tough lesson because I liked a lot of the comfort that I had in my life and my patterns.
Yeah.
I even kind of liked being the whiny, snivelly little guy sometimes because it felt good to be the victim.
Yes.
It felt good to say, it's not my fault.
Yes. It's a relief.
And that is the weakest, most pitiful, embarrassing thing that any person, much less a man, but especially a masculine man.
Yes.
Let me tell you something, guys. You don't have to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to tell you, it's your fault. It's my fault. It's our fault.
Yes.
We got to own this. We got to quit looking around for things to point the finger at and start saying, yeah, it's my fault. Even if it's not your fault, take it anyway.
Yes.
Let the fault be yours and watch how much you can grow in that process. So anyway, we're talking about adding self-respect, learning how to respect ourselves. I said that I picked up habits of learning from other people and looking for better input so I can increase my output.
Yes.
What do you think?
I love that. I love that. That's what I call causing everything to be subject to review. So at some point, you and myself included, I looked around at the people I chose as influence, and they were subject to review. It's that the model I want. So the first thing I did is I did the whole editing process. And then if anybody kind of had to go or I let them drift a little bit, who was I going to replace that with? What was going to be the next supplement? And what did I want in those people? And so I know in a lot of cases, sometimes there were real people that we could attract to, but a lot of times it was just information. So we start looking for authors and inspirational people, overcomers. And I know you did. We talk about this a lot. And so that really became my first best source. And so as I'm out working in my yard and driving and doing things and running errands, I began to put people in my ear.
That's right.
And as that information starts to basically kind of take its root and start to change the DNA, if you will, then it was application. And I started looking forward to those contests. Like I might be in a conversation with someone. I go, well, here's a good opportunity. Boom. And it worked. And boy, that's motivating because that's remedy. I was running to relief before that. I was a relief guy. Oh, well, if it makes me feel better, I'm just going to do it. And I give all the excuses in the world on why I can do this relief thing, but it wasn't solving anything.
Nope.
So searching for those sources became my first best goal. My first best, my goal was to be better. My objective was to first find the sources. Later, and I just think it's just the law of God's great universe, is people started coming into my life. And then I could see them. Likely they were already there. They were in our organizations, they were in our churches and our fraternities and various other things. But we could see them better. I wanted to know more about what they know. And I really wanted to know their backstory. And you know what? I learned a lot about their backstory. It wasn't too dissimilar from mine.
Right.
They were a lot like me.
Isn't it shocking to find out how much of the same boat we're all in?
Yes.
That almost without fail, we're not unique at all.
Not at all.
While we have some unique perspectives and things like that, we ain't the first.
No.
And we ain't gonna be the last.
That's right.
You said something in your discussion just then about you look forward to that contest.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And I'm going to take it apart just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You were testing yourself.
Yes.
And with that, you were keeping score.
Yeah.
And because you were keeping score, you were competing against yourself. So with that keeping of the score, you could improve.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't do that, you'd have no knowledge of your benchmark.
Right.
And, whether or not you were succeeding.
Yes.
So you began to measure your intake and output and where you were and where you wanted to be. And that's perfect. That's great.
Yes, because until it was going to become a part of my nature, I kind of felt like I needed these measurable moments so that I could refer back to. And I can still remember some of those. Some of them have kind of faded into the fog of memory, but there are a few that stand out to say that was one of those moments. That was one of those moments where I'm like, if this is true, if what I am studying is true, if it's valid, if it's authentic, which is one of your defining words, well, we're about to find out.
That's
and
right.
then it worked. And I'm telling you, men, look for those moments. Train up, but look for those moments. I love the word test. That's a biblical word. Whatever we're going through a trial, they said, of many kinds, they said, and it puts our faith to the test. And oftentimes when I read that to folks, people might say, who do you think faith, what faith are they talking about? And they all run to their maker. I go, no, it's faith in yourself. How's that going to get drawn out? Well, you have to be courageous. You can't be fearful. You have to be courageous enough. Okay, ask me, put me to the test. And there's going to be a rate of failure, but that's just room for growth. One of the things I settled on real quick is I call it the 51%er. 51% or more of my competition wears my jersey. 49% or less wears theirs. So even if they're the bigger, better athlete in the moment, if you will, I still have a job to do. And whether that's just to get in the way and they're going to run over me and get close to that quarterback, but if I can make a little bit harder at each snap, I'm doing my job. Yeah. Now I may walk away a pretty beat up guy, but he'll know I was there. And even though he's going to win the day, but I'm going to win a little bit of this moment. That's my personal challenge. And then also, whenever I've had conflicting relationships with people in the past, I settled on that number as well. I own 51% or more of the problem while we're having discord right now. Not that I'm probably most of the problem. Maybe sometimes I'm not, but I cannot give somebody else more power over my own personal challenges. That's not how it works. I've got to take majority of responsibility.
That's right. So kind of to translate what you're saying is that you're not saying you own 51% of the fault, but you own 51% of the responsibility of leadership through the problem. Yeah. If you want to see the other side, right, somebody's got to take the lead.
That's right.
You can't both be sitting at 49% and there's a 2%, unknown sitting out there and nobody's making any choices. You're just at a stalemate.
Right.
So sure, if you take the 51, then you're creating the direction.
Yes.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yes. And it's a numbers that just drop in your head. Cause we measure things. We divide our counts. We divide, our, if we're fixing our plate of food, if I see how many people are behind me. Well, I don't take more than anybody, can't get a portion. So we're always we have this little bit of a percentage measurement. But in relationships, I wanted to take a majority of responsibility.
Right.
And of course, put in a majority effort. And because there's no other way that I am going to be able to see the maximum benefit of that if I give more of it away. Now, after it's developed, that makes generosity that much easier. because now I have this pattern of consumption. If we have a pattern of consumption, whether it's listening to things, discussing things, hanging out with friends and learning, well, then we're never going to lose, because that's never really going to go away.
That's right. So I love the idea that the thing that you just said, the pattern of consumption. I like the way you said that. And what I take that to mean is you're constantly taking in.
Yeah.
Constantly taking in. You're constantly learning. You have an insatiable desire for more improvement, for more learning, for more gain.
Yes.
And I think that's an essential part of growth. Mm-hmm. Now, we're drawing to an end of this episode, and I want to encourage you out there. If you're a man, if you're a dad, if you're a female that has a man in your life, a dad in your life, if you're a kid and it's your dad and you want to help him be better, understand, guys, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, it's not the big, enormous steps forward that make all the difference. It's the very small, compounded, adaptive habits that we create. Don't focus on trying to jump over the canyon.
Right.
Just focus on taking one small step forward.
That's it.
And eventually, and in way less of a time than you think, you'll look back and you will have crossed the canyon.
Yes.
And I can tell you that you deserve to respect yourself, regardless of who you are. And there's no time in your life when it's too late. Mm-hmm. There's until you die, until there's no more life left in you, mm-hmm. you always have the ability to learn, to create, to become more.
Yes.
Right. And through that process, not only will you grow, but you'll bless the entire world that you touch.
Yes.
And it's worth it. That journey is worth it. So I would encourage you, please challenge yourself, become a learner, become insatiably curious, and begin to become a consumer of personal development, and focus on respecting yourself so you can live in the freedom of authenticity every day.
Yes.
And thank you guys out there for joining us today for another episode of What Are We Doing in this series of
Fatherhood,
being a dad, being a man. We talked about that today. Mm-hmm. We really do want to hear from you. We would love your input, questions, comments, criticism, mm-hmm. No matter what it is. Yeah. We would love to hear from you.
Sure. Well, what are some of your best practices? I know we have men in the audience, and message us and let us know, hey, here's something that I found that works, works best for me, and I've been able to grow with it. We'd love to hear that, because we want to share that with folks that may not have a direct connection to you, but maybe they tune into us. And so your input is just as valuable.
Yeah, it could be a book. It could be a workbook.
Yes.
It could be a phrase, something that came in handy, just anything.
Yes.
We would love to hear from you. We'd love to learn from you and with you. But first of all, most of all, we really appreciate you guys allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And we will see you next week, Tuesday at 10 o'clock live, right here on our What Are We Doing podcast. Y'all have a great day.